I'm Katie Jackson. I am president and CEO of Help4HD International. We're a nonprofit serving the Huntington's disease community and juvenile Huntington's disease community. So I am so thankful to be here to be able to talk about one of our programs, our law enforcement education program, and alongside my dear friend Jessica.
And I'm Jessica Marsalek. I am the Associate Director of Community Services at HDSA. I oversee our social work network, I oversee our support groups, our youth and young adult programs, and our disability services program. So I'm happy to share what we do to help support families and individuals dealing with law enforcement and dealing with corrections and opportunities that we can educate. So we're going to do a joint presentation. Katie is going to share about the LEAP program, as well as we're going to talk about ways that we might have some suggestions that we've learned through others on how to, and our personal experiences on how to approach and how to educate law enforcement and first responders so that we can have an educated, supportive community that would respond to our loved ones with HD.
So on a personal note, my husband passed away from Huntington 6 years ago, and my husband was a sheriff. So I was a law enforcement wife from the time I was 20, and my husband was diagnosed with HD when I was 23. So it was a big balance for me, right? Especially as my husband got sicker and the Korea came, and we started actually, as a law enforcement family, having run-ins with law enforcement, which was incredibly shocking to me. I did have something that I could say my husband's a sheriff. He's been a sheriff since he was 21, and we had that brotherhood where we got support, but sometimes we didn't. And so I took a lot of this learning experience through when I was younger and kind of pushed it in at Help4HD with my team into different training programs. We were really lucky that we had other people from the HD community that were firefighters, law enforcement, crisis intervention teams, people coming together and working with us to create this program, and it's forever evolving. So, but yeah, so that's kind of, so my personal story is that I have 3 children at risk.
Thank you, Katie. We don't have any disclosures that we need to list. Why is law enforcement education so important?
Well, this is like so silly that we're talking about, because you guys all know in this room why law enforcement education is important, right? So not only does our loved ones often are accused of being drunk or on narcotics, but we also have, the psychiatric and cognitive parts of Huntington's disease that will often bring in crisis intervention teams, or people have to come in within our homes. We also, of course, have suicide ideation, and then interestingly enough, last year I was in this hotel 9 months ago. I was asked by Crisis Intervention Team International to come and speak to them on de-escalation. So I did an hour presentation with, I think at that point there was 23 crisis intervention team officers in this building that I taught. And so a lot of them came after, and we had these really long conversations for a couple days, and a lot of their patients living with HD that they were interacting with were actually homeless and displaced.
And HD is so misunderstood in our communities anyway. When we call for help, we want to make sure that those who arrive are able to, we can proactively reach out to them and have some education to provide them the skills to approach us in a way that is supportive and helpful instead of in a punitive fashion. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and just really enhance the importance of educating these professionals in particular, because we only call them when we really need help. And so we need that approach of support, kindness, compassion, not punitive and criminalization. So we'll talk through that.
So there are these, we'll go through some ideas of different things that HDSA and Help4HD have as resources for you as families, but one thing that we started our law enforcement program, I said the reason, but there's actually a whole nother reason, and I am sure some of you guys remember this. In 2015, there was a man that was taking his children, 2 and 4 years old, to the park, and he was taking them in the stroller, and of course he had chorea, and a citizen called in a concern. The cop showed up. He was probably around 130 pounds. 3 officers sat on him as his children screamed. A concerned citizen walked by and started filming it. They were telling her to quit filming. She said, "No, I am on public property. I will be filming this because something is wrong." The children were screaming. They ended up breaking his teeth. They broke his bones. He was bruised from head to toe. They took the kids into like a protective thing until the mom can come get them. It was horrible. The lady put it on YouTube, and the community cried out and said, we need law enforcement training, we need nonprofits, you guys need to step up and help us. And so that year we came together and raised enough money, put enough money to exhibit at a place called the IACP. It's the largest law enforcement meeting in the world. It's the International Chief of Police Association meeting. There we exhibited, and there was, at that time we talked to about, it was like 14,000 officers. We were brand new, we were young, we didn't know what to say, but we just like basically said, listen to us, know about HD, and this is not okay what happened, these children, what this family went through. So that's how this whole thing started, and then it kicked off, and we started traveling all over the nation. So we started doing not only national and international law enforcement programs, we started doing state programs. So we've been everywhere from Iowa to Florida to California to Nevada to, everywhere. And we continue to grow and do these state programs. But the thing of it is, we ask all of them, we work as a team with these crisis intervention teams, co-responder teams, about please tell us what we can do too, right? And the one thing they tell us is one thing they wish is that you go to them and you introduce yourself. They want to know you. They want to know someone with Huntington's disease is in their area. They want to get to know your family. And please know that this is something this is not a one and done. Your loved one's symptoms are going to continue to change. Different symptoms are going to start coming on, and you will develop a friendship, hopefully, within that department that they will be able to support your family. I had an individual that he loved to go to Starbucks, and as he got sicker, his family was very worried because he would always ride his bike or drive to Starbucks every day. That was his routine. Well, as his symptoms started getting worse, he started having more cognitive impairment. They started really working with not only Starbucks, but the law enforcement agents in their area, and they became friends. And it was kind of like, it was known. They would drive by, they would wave at him, say hi. Everyone, it was like he was kind of like this now local celebrity, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone was excited to see him, and he was supported. But that was because his family advocated so hard very early on, and they kept going to the department. They kept teaching the law enforcement. I know we are stressed out. My husband had Huntington's. I was a caregiver. I get it, that we have very little time in our day besides supporting our loved one. But I think this is important to do. Like everything in every company, you are going to have people that are not good people. And I would use a cuss word, but I'm not a da-da-da officer or a da-da-da nonprofit worker. In everything. So when you go to a department, you may get someone that looks at you and they don't care. And that just means you found the wrong person. Don't give up. Keep asking around for the right person, and eventually you will find the right person, especially if you really gear towards more their crisis intervention team or their mental health department. Also, let's give the officers grace. There are 59, last year at Crisis Intervention Team International, we learned there are over 59 billion people living with mental health conditions in the United States, 200 diagnosable mental health conditions. These officers can't know everything about all of them. But what we can do is, especially nationally, but locally, we can really get to know our departments, and we can really help them understand what our families are going through, and in hopes they support us back.
And to be empathetic, they probably, to think about how many people day to day that they interact with that are intoxicated, that are, struggling with chemical health issues, seeing some of the symptoms that they may see in somebody with Huntington's, they may confuse with. It's, we can understand that, but if we can proactively educate, I know I'm singing to the choir, but it's one of those things that to approach and to educate is just to provide them an opportunity to have empathy and to have understanding.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And another thing that I think is really hard is that when we first start engaging with law enforcement, we want to educate and give awareness about everything about HD, right? So we may be even a little overwhelming. I know I am. I'm like, okay, first of all, we are a neurodegenerative disease. It's generational, and they look at me like, whoa, wait. And then I had to learn when I was training law enforcement that I did kind of have to start simple, right? It was like they just wanted to know kind of, what does this look like? What can we do to support? And then like we have 10 minutes, right? So I kind of learned a really quick spiel, especially when I'm engaging fast at large meetings, to let them know kind of, and then in hopes they go back to our training and our information and they learn more, is kind of the goal. So I think that's also to keep in mind, is that, you know, we want to be very overwhelming, and I'm talking about myself, not all of you, but we do have to kind of pull back a little bit and understand that they have limited time. And eventually, when the trust is actually formed, you'll probably have more time to talk to them about more things.
And I think, Katie, to speak to, you know, when we're having conversations about Huntington's disease with anybody, it's having that, you know, you can kind of sense when somebody, okay, thank you for sharing. And then when people start asking questions, then you know they're getting engaged. And so that's an opportunity for you to continue to educate. So, you know, having your elevator pitch for, you know, what is Huntington's disease, your quick couple sentence, and then a little bit more, you have a little more facts, and then we have someone that's like sitting down with you and come in, I want to have a real conversation. That's when you share it all, because they're really interested. So, you know, there's opportunities sometimes where you might meet a professional at a police station or at a first responder opportunity where they really want to listen. We had a support group in Richfield, Minnesota. It was a very large support group that's been going on for many years, 30 to 40 people. A couple of our members are here. And we had a police officer sitting in our parking lot at the church we met at. And I went up and I introduced myself and said, hey, our group is meeting here. Have you ever heard of Huntington's disease? Would you like to come in and meet some of our members that meet in your community that you serve? And he was so kind. He came in and he sat down with us, and he you know, the families educated him on what Huntington's disease was. And, you know, it's like taking those opportunities to he was really interested. He wanted to come in and learn. And so kind of sensing where people are at, and it's okay to have that small, medium, and large explanation of what it is, because some people really do want to learn.
They do, and we touched their hearts. I was at when I was at crisis intervention training, I met the executive board member of another nonprofit that does law enforcement training and things. It's called Co-Responders USA, and so I went to CoCon, is what they call it. I was asked there when she went to my training to go to theirs, and I trained at theirs, which is also an amazing meeting. But I found out we were at a training, and she emailed me, and I said, hey, look, I said, we're having one of our symposiums at the time. And she goes, I would love to come. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. The executive director of Co-Responders USA is wanting to come to our event. And her husband came, and she met this amazing guy named Adam, who most of us know, Adam Smolsky, and he was on the dance floor, and it really, like, every meeting now, law enforcement I go, she's like, how's Adam? Like, how is Adam doing? I still communicate with him. And I was like, how cool is that? Like, so they really do, he touched her heart, and now she really puts Huntington's on a forefront of their nonprofit that does a lot of advanced officer training when it comes to crisis intervention. So that's kind of cool, like how that kind of happens and those things work out. There are some things that we offer that are support services from both organizations. And even though maybe you're not ready for them yet, I would always have them on hand. One thing I will tell you is that a lot of states have these amazing things called mobile crisis intervention teams. Not all states, not all areas. Michigan is actually amazing if you live in Michigan. Their mobile crisis team is incredible. So a lot of times the people on those teams are social workers or nurses, and they come with the law enforcement for a support. So make sure when you do, always have those numbers on hand and look in your local area and see what's available to you. Because maybe a lot of times I just had a situation, a little one was having suicide ideation. The parents weren't sure what to do. They called law enforcement. It didn't go well. So they found a mobile crisis intervention team. There was one in their area. She's a very young little girl, and so it's kind of one of those things that really, they needed a crisis intervention team for her. But because she had to go to a pediatric psych facility, but specifically, but her mom found, and the crisis mobile team said, don't call them, call us. So they were actually their first responders. Law enforcement came after the mobile crisis intervention team got there to help this little girl. So find out actually what is available in your area, and always have those phone numbers on hand.
Proactively.
Yeah.
So find out if you are in an area that doesn't have a very strong mobile crisis unit, sometimes there's areas where they won't come out for like 3 hours because they're so busy, or, so depending upon your area, learn about their response times, maybe call them ahead of time and ask those questions. Would you guys be a number that could respond to me in a timely fashion when we're in crisis? If they aren't, letting when you do call 911, sometimes paraphrasing it as a mental health crisis is a way to let them know that we're dealing with maybe mental health symptoms of HD, but they don't know HD. So framing it like a mental health crisis, they will approach it in a way that is, like I said, not punitive and corrective. It's more, you know what, we're going to approach it in a way that's, how can I come in and help? So that's just another way of approaching a crisis situation if you're in an area that doesn't have a strong mobile crisis unit.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think what Jessica said in the beginning is so smart. We always go behind a crisis, right? Like we wait till a crisis happens as families, and then we kind of are lost for a minute and trying to figure out our way. And I loved one of our events. We do this thing called a HYPE panel. It's highly interactive participant education, and this is for professionals, HD professionals, and our community. And we ask questions, and I think this one question came up, and I was like, this is such a good question. She said, what if there's a fire in my house? And the expert said, well, call 911. She's like, no, I know I need to call 911. She said, but I have a child with JHD and I have a husband with HD, and I'm caring for both of them. Who do I get out first? Right? What do I do? They're both pretty immobile, right? They were both, the daughter was almost bedbound and the husband had a rough time. So they said, so we thought about it, and I was like, we have to get ahead of these problems. All you have to do is call the fire department, let them know, I have a child with JHD, I have a husband with HD, can you come out when you have a chance, and can we do an exit plan? Can you help us come up with something? They may not know either, because this is a very rare situation, right? Where she's caregiving for 2 people, but actually, and she had 2 young kids too, so it was a big thing. But maybe work with the fire departments and work with the crisis intervention team and law enforcement about having plans in case something happens. Another thing, if you walk into your department, I always say, I think the biggest thing is bring someone with Huntington's disease. And often we don't get that opportunity when we do these trainings, but every time we do and we have someone with HD that's willing to come, we bring them. And because they really need to see what does delayed response look like? Everyone knows that when you're pulled over, you're supposed to take out your ID, right? Law enforcement ID registration or whatever. So in our minds, we're trained to put our hands in our pocket, right? Pull out our ID. With someone with HD, and when they have cognitive impairment, they're going to say, don't reach in your pocket. What are they going to do? They're going to reach in their pocket. Of course they are. That's what they've always known to do. The officer is giving a direction, but they are going to, if their mind's set up, they're going to get that ID for them. So we've done a lot of that in the training of actually bringing someone with HD and saying, hey, if someone told you to not put your hands in your pocket, and they say, I want to get my ID out. We had one Tom, he was like the best advocate. He was husband of our law enforcement, who's head of our law enforcement now, Vicki Owen. And they would ask, he would do huge trainings, and Vicki would say, what's your address, Tom? And Tom would say, I live on Flamingo Street. Tom never lived on Flamingo Street. But he had it in his head now that he lived on Flamingo Street, so he said it every single time. And so Vicki said, he doesn't live on Flamingo Street. So do you realize how important I was the first contact you guys need to find, was me, his caregiver, because he doesn't live on Flamingo Street, so you'd have a hard time finding it. So I think those real life scenarios of knowing where your loved one is when you go into the department and they want to meet them, show them. And don't be embarrassed. This is all about helping your loved one and helping yourself through these things. So put it out there right away, exactly what your struggles are at that moment. And like I said, keep updating them as they change.
And it helps to have that face and personal connection. It helps to have that face and personal connection. Oh, yeah. But both organizations have created some resources that we wanted to share with you today. Some are online, some will be QR coded in the back of the room. We have some handouts to share with you to find resources. Both organizations have some, so we want to highlight some of the resources that are available to arm you to have those conversations.
So both of our organizations have ID cards. So these are just something that everyone's seen. You put them in your wallet, you put them in your pocket. I have Huntington's disease. It says some symptoms. There's usually a place for you to write your caregiver's information and stuff in case your family member wants to carry these around in their personal wallet. So both orgs have these. They're available. They're free. You want more, we'll send them to you. So I think these ID cards are very important to have, especially for personal information on your loved one.
And for here at convention, the Help4HD ones are at the back of the room, but at the mission table, we also have a stack of them as well. And I take a couple because they kind of like get nasty in your pocket after a while. So grab a couple. Some laminate them. Some get those little plastic sleeves for cheap. You know, you have them so they stay nice.
Yeah.
But you can put your information. If in emergency, please call, and it has where you can put your loved one's contact information, and explains a little bit of the symptoms. I may walk like I'm intoxicated. I may slur my speech. There's just some understanding on the card where a person could identify and share it with somebody to educate if they can't speak or are nervous.
Absolutely. And then we have the car and window decals. So those are also in the back for you guys. This is the car one. It's blue. So you put it on your car and it says an individual with Huntington's disease is on board. And it says a couple things: may not be able to speak or articulate pain and injury, may not be aware of the situation, may be resistant to help, may appear intoxicated. So just as a couple symptoms, you put this on your car, and I think this is like our most important thing we created, because if you get in a car accident and you're the caregiver and you're out, you're unable, you're unresponsive, this way you're letting the first responders know that your loved one may need more help and that you may not be able to provide them in case you're injured. So these are back there. These are for your cars. You have multiple cars, take multiple stickers, for sure. And also, it's great awareness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are our house stickers. So these ones, a lot of people put on their front door and their windows for first responders and co-responders when they come to the home. So it says someone living with Huntington's disease may have involuntary movements, psychiatric behaviors, cognitive impairment. And then at the bottom it says, please treat our loved one with respect and dignity when you're coming in our home, right? Like, you're coming into our space, you are helping us, so let's just try to understand this a little bit more, because sometimes they may come in and they may, obviously, majority of them will not know what Huntington's is, right?
And there's also some law enforcement education kits. I know HDSA has one put together. It's on our website. There's one that's for law enforcement. It's a booklet that's for law enforcement. There's also a handout that you can put a picture of your loved one and then share some information about when they get agitated or distressed. This might be what you see, just to personalize it so that your local law enforcement might know what they're approaching when they come into your home or respond to help your family.
And ours are, we have a QR code that's also in the back. It's on this, and it's actually what we pass out, thank you, what we pass out to law enforcement when we go to all of our trainings. We used to do flash drives, but then law enforcement became their IT departments kind of buckled that down and said, no, we're not putting flash drives in our computer. So now the QR code they're fine with. And so they just scan that. There's brochures, there's videos, there's testimony. There are HD experts that speak about different symptoms and things like that. They've kind of been broke. You can break them down also. Sometimes they just want brochures. It's really cool. I was at National Sheriff's Association. I think Jen, I was there with Jen Perks, who is an amazing sheriff from an HD family. And we were there, and the people were coming up to us, and a guy came from Florida, actually, and I was like, oh, here's our training. He goes, I already have that. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, it's mandatory for our department to watch your training. And I'm like, how cool is that? I was like, awesome. So I thought that was really neat. So a couple of departments have made our training mandatory.
So some of these tools we're going to talk about, they're to arm you to be able to show up and have tools in your hand that if they are willing to sit down with you, if they are willing to go further with the education beyond your conversation, you have those tools accessible through the resources that Katie mentioned, and then a few other that we'll talk about today. So, brochures and publications. Yeah. Brochures and publications. This is one of ours, law enforcement. I know we both have, both orgs have tons of brochures and publications for you guys for a lot of different situations. I think this is probably one of the most, this is what happens when we don't get ahead of, and sometimes it just happens because even if we get ahead of it, because living in an HD family, we are going to have crisis happen. It's just kind of what happens.
So, of course, we have a lot of our loved ones that get incarcerated, are having to go through court cases, and you're working with a judge, and you're working with lawyers that know nothing about HD. And a lot of times we have very dismissive lawyers that are like, well, we don't really care. We have a huge caseload. We're just going to kind of push this through, and so they don't get really fair representation. We have an amazing guy, Danny, prosecuting lawyer in Florida, who has really helped us with some of these conversations, hard conversations that we've been having lately with a couple cases that we have open. But so what we have done is we send typically, if they are going through a court case, we will send the judge, and they're really receptive to this, by the way. We'll send them a letter from Help4HD and just talking about like, what, individualize it a little bit to the family, and then a ton of support things for the judge to read about like what is HD and things like that. And then we also equip the lawyers with that information. A lot of times we've also helped advocates be in the court room for a loved one that does not have one, that can't speak for themselves. We had a judge that got really mad at a lady because he said, "You're not even listening to me," and because she kept looking away, and then she got up and walked out. And she was done, right? And the judge was so upset, and like he was the judge for the next hearing. It was like, no, she didn't walk out because she was being disruptive or disrespecting you. She has HD, she was impulsive, and she was done. And she just did what we all want to do in that room. So things like that, we can help get advocates over to be with them through the cases and really help. And then we have a couple of cases that are really hard where people aren't diagnosed with HD. So we know that a lot of the supports that they should have, they don't have because they don't have a diagnosis, and they end up in jail. And that's a really hard place to get them diagnosed, as Danny's shaking his head because we have a couple cases. There's also that. So we also help advocate for different ways they can get diagnosed while they are incarcerated. It's not easy, but we do take those cases on and help.
Yep, and we do it at HDSA as well. We get reached out to at least once a month for somebody who is, it's generally family cases, to be honest. There's a lot of families where there's kids involved and there's a divorce happening, and so a lot of times we'll be pulled in to educate somebody who's representing the children, or a judge who needs to learn more about Huntington's disease because the parent that's not affected is trying to use HD, kind of weaponize that as against the person that is at risk or does have symptoms. So a lot of times we'll come in and support just the educational piece. We've also been brought into some criminal cases, and so really we come in trying not to know really much about the case at all, but just to be the HD, bring that HD expertise to the table. So my coworkers and I try to really be that voice, that educational piece. I know my team and I have done that many times, usually virtually. Last year, a judge flew me to Chicago for the day to just be the expert in HD and teach them about HD. So it was a long day, but definitely a courtroom that appreciated learning about Huntington's and really helped the gentleman that's impacted have a fair trial.
And I think that she made a really good point about your local social workers.
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely have played such a huge part in some of these cases for us, as far as them writing letters and stuff from their centers.
Yeah, we read a lot of letters
so it makes a huge difference, and I'm so thankful that a lot of them, and they usually always take the time, yes, absolutely, will write a letter, especially if they're treating and they're in the clinic with that patient. They've obviously grown a bond and love that patient. So it's always really hard for all of us when we have someone in a very hard situation, they're incarcerated, and we're trying to help, and everyone kind of working together. And sometimes it's warranted, right? Like they aren't safe to themselves or others. There has been some really horrible cases that we have had. Attempted murder on a spouse. Like, we've had some really, really hard things that we've had to deal with. And we're not saying that because they have HD, they get a get out of jail card, right? We're just saying, please understand that what this disease is, and also understand that they'd do much better on a medical floor, not in general population, which a lot of times is where they end up, or in obviously a psychiatric hospital or mental health facility. So if a loved one ends up incarcerated in jail, We have also spent a lot of time talking to the medical staff, usually their charge nurse or their head nurse on their medical floor. We had a really bad incident where he got in, his family lived in California. He was actually in Arizona. He got there somehow. He ended up incarcerated, and he went off all his meds and caused complete chaos in that jail. And the family kept calling and advocating and saying, you know, he needs his medication, he needs his medication. And then, interestingly enough, we called as advocates and as the nonprofit, we talked to the charge nurse, and he got back on his medications, which was really interesting. So sometimes you just maybe need extra support, extra person's voice, and sometimes with the nonprofits behind our name, sometimes that does help. So if you guys need that, know we're HDSA and Help4HD, we're here. And I know HDO, HD Reach, all of these orgs are here for you. Just call us.
And our local HDSA COEs, their teams are really active in supporting as well. So our neurologists, our social workers, our teams are really supportive in advocating and educating any local professionals. And sometimes they take the letters behind their name really seriously, and so they may not hear you as a family member. If you need that support and that person on our team that has those letters behind their name, they might hear the same thing just in a different way. We can help support that as well.
Yeah, no, it's true, that PhD. I'm trying to figure out like where I go. Like I heard there's some islands you can get it in like 2 weeks. Like I'm trying to figure it out. That way my name means something when I give these letters, but yeah. And then of course the mobile crisis intervention teams that we talked about. Yeah. Oh boy, we have a lot of slides, sorry. I didn't realize we did so much. Wow, we're good. Good for us.
Well, we have a few more tips for y'all.
Some thoughts. Start early by engaging with local law enforcement that we talked about. Introduce your loved one to local. We've talked about most of these. Wear HD-specific clothing. That, of course, happens. That, of course, helps. I remember we were on a cruise ship. We were asked to go back to our room because my husband was drunk and he was embarrassing the whole cruise, a Carnival cruise. Yeah, right. Like everyone's drunk on those cruises. And my husband's sober, thank you. But we were asked to go back to our room. The next night he wore an HD shirt out. Suddenly it was a little bit easier. So I tried to get him to wear as many HD things as I could, but he also was like, I don't want HD to be my life, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to wear shirts all the time. But it does help sometimes when you're in those like settings like a cruise where a lot of people are drinking and there's a lot of stuff like that going on. Keep compact if you have crisis teams. Proactively discuss specific steps with local officers and situations. Collaborate with local first responders to develop exit strategies in case of disasters like we talked about, like a fire. Reach out to Help4HD and HDSA. And the social workers, I think they play a huge role in this. Request that we're part of their mental health education training. They all have to do it, especially if they're in a CIT program. They have to do 40. It goes, state by state, but typically the average is they have to do 40 hours a year to keep up with their crisis intervention training. There are a lot of conditions and diseases that are going in and trying to get into their program. So we actually were just with the Parkinson's and Movement Disorder Alliance talking about maybe coming together. It's always great partnering with other diseases that so we can get ourselves in there, because sometimes if it's multiple diseases, they're more willing to take the training because they kind of, in this case, would kill 3 birds with 1 stone. I hate that saying, but that's what they would be doing. Remember that educating law enforcement is an ongoing process, and of course, if you need to call 911, consider using the phrase, as Jess talked about all day today, mental health crisis.
And if you have the desire to reach out to your local community, there's probably other community members in your local support group or in your local chapter that have that desire as well. So it might be an opportunity to reach out to your local chapter to ask, I know there are some chapters around the country that are currently trying to educate their state, their areas of the country. And so if you could partner with a larger group to kind of kill more birds with 1 stone, work together and really be more powerful in numbers, then it's not all on you, and then you can make more contacts and kind of like build those bridges, cross those bridges together as a team.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Here, I threw some pictures in of our training. This is what I'm talking about. This was our first training at the IACP, the International Chief of Police. And then we just travel all over. This is what our booth looks like. We sit in these huge venues like this place. We've been here. And we sit with a table. And I honestly have to say, I am shocked at how many people line up to hear about Huntington's. And I do want to tell you that. Our table is never empty. People line up and they're around the corner, especially in crisis intervention and co-responders, wanting to learn about HD because most of them have someone with HD on their caseload. And they are like, we need help. They're asking for help, just like we're asking for help. So it's definitely, they definitely do want to learn about HD, majority of them, in these different programs that we travel all over the United States and do. I think that's it. That's a blank slide.
All right.
That probably should say questions.
Yeah.
So I am going to ask that if you have a question, let me come to you with the mic, because that way we'll be able to hear it on the recording as well as in the room, even if you're really loud and good at projecting. So I'm going to come over here, and I'll try to get to everybody before we're done with our time.
And please know this is recorded and live, so you don't have to say your name. So just letting you know.
Hi, I'm John Stevens from New
Hi,
Jersey. Jersey. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. And Jessica, thanks for that last comment. So my daughter is gene positive. She lives in the next town over from me, and I want to go to her police department, my police department. Plus, we have a support group in the town she lives. And that's a great idea because now I can get the support group involved and have numbers. But my question is, I know you engage with law enforcement. Just give me some ideas how to do that. Do I call and make an appointment? Do I just show up? Who do I talk to? How do I get this going so I can do it right the first time?
You could do either. I would recommend if you do show up during business hours. Obviously, it's a lighter crew in the evenings and weekends. But you could show up in person. Usually you can ask for either your, introduce yourself, and, I have a family member that has Huntington's disease. I would love to speak with your officer or your person in charge of education, in charge of mental health, in charge of crisis. Like, every department has a little different variation, but all of them have an educational officer that's responsible for providing that educational piece. And so it might be one of those titles. So depending upon the department, depending upon the location, using those terminologies, Huntington's disease does have psychiatric mental health symptoms, and so I'd like to talk to somebody that could, we can share a little bit about our family, our loved ones, so that if we do need to call you, that you'll know a little bit more about Huntington's disease. And so the officers that I've always talked to have been always very receptive, but it's finding that right person. So using those keywords of education, mental health, we talked about crisis mental health. Some departments do now have social workers on staff. Some have a nurse on staff. So, asking if you have somebody here that we can talk to and educate, then those are the kind of keywords I would use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If
And
you have any, if you can't get through and you can't break through, if you call us, we can call for you. And I would say, hey, look, we have a family, we do education, and then we can kind of bridge that, and then you're the one we would send for education.
And we're free. We're free. We're the right price.
I have the same follow-up question, actually. I'm in the Houston area, and within my 10-mile radius, there are, 10 different departments. Mm-hmm. And I've not had luck trying to outreach via email. I haven't had any response at all. So are you saying make an appointment or camp out or show up on their doorstep?
You could call and inquire, say, I'd like to speak to somebody in education or your officer that provides training for the officers. Would it be best for me to come in person and find a time to speak with somebody, or should I make an appointment and hopefully try to navigate through the phone maybe? Email is easier for them to. You need to be a little louder, squeakier wheel. I know you can do it. I believe in you.
So I'll make this really fast. I had a neighbor that was a police officer, and then he ended up moving away, became a U.S. Marshal, but it was about a year ago that I said, hey, Sam, how are you and Hallie doing? By the way, who would be a person that I could talk to about HD? And then he gave me the education person, and so we kind of talked back and forth. So also, kind of befriend the guys in blue or the people in blue.
I know my family brought donuts in one time. So, you know,
You're going here.
we all like food, right, and sweets.
What do you think would happen if they refuse to like listen to you guys?
If they refuse to listen. So like they refuse to meet with you, they refuse to just not even learn. Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen Jimmy Pollard speak, but he walks everywhere, and it's like as an AVP team, like it's like you're like stay still, and I'm like I do it too, so I'm sorry. I'm telling you, it's not maybe not the first person or second person, but you will find someone in that department that will listen. There are people, they're very, very caring people in the education part of it and CIT and crisis and things within their departments that aren't even law enforcement. If that kind of like intimidates you, that's okay that you could ask for their social workers and their nurses, if that makes you feel more comfortable. If you find they don't listen to you, just call us because we will be a voice with you, okay? We're stronger when we're together and we're louder. And I'm really loud, so call me.
Hi there. I'm Gerald from Missouri. If we're interested in taking some of your literature, your cards, how do we get access to more of those things? So, I mean, you have a limited supply here, but if we wanted to be a voice for HD, for example, we have family members, and we want to be a voice for them because some of them still drive themselves, which is a different issue, and they're very proud, and that trying to take that or encourage them to retire that privilege is very difficult, and they don't want to placard their car or have those cards with them, even though we work very hard to encourage them to have those with them in that case. But how do we get more of your materials that we could use to solicit for this organization?
Yeah, and first of all, addressing that, I mean, I 100% get there. Their autonomy, right to your, like as Jamie, I said, self-determination on how they are going, you know, how they talk about their HD status. It's just like medical bracelets with sensory, like they don't want to wear them, right? So I was just saying that I respect that they don't want to, you know, do that. That's fine. As far as materials, we'll get you anything you need. You just email Vicki. It's VICKI at help, HELP, 4, HD.org, and she'll send you as many kits as you need.
Hi, I'm Dr. Antoine from New York. So I had the same question, so I am going to be sending to ask for that information. Some of the things that we're going beyond the police is also the local emergency room to educate them, because even as a medical provider, your local emergency room may not be aware of some of the things that may come up because it is so rare and because you're few and far in between the nearest center. So doing the same thing for those places as well. One of the introduction lines, I think, that would be sort of a spark to let people listen is to start off by saying, my family member is in your area of location, response location, with a rare condition that will require emergency intervention. Those intervention may be X, Y, and Z. And we want to let you know what that will look like. We want to give you some more information. How can I do that? So it already breaks that, hey, I'm not wasting your time. I'm trying to help you do your job a little bit better.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had the pleasure of spending some time with this amazing woman last night, and she is going around, and what she brought up was so important because we started our EMT program because we were talking like people were placing them where they were aspirating. Like people with HD can't be placed like that. They're going to aspirate. But then she started telling me stories about them putting spit bags over them and their face and these different things that they're going through, and I just was like, thank you for doing what you're doing, and I really hope that you become a huge voice because we need to know these kind of things and then work together on how we make it right, and we'll be stronger in numbers for sure.
Thank you. Good morning. You guys are so awesome. Christy Figueroa Pettis, and I'm with San Diego. And I wanted to piggyback off that because we also had to do that with hospice. So my mom was trying to get up to go to the restroom, and we weren't there yet. And so they were trying to strap her down. She was just trying to get up. So we had to educate them. So can we have a meeting? We had a family meeting with them, and we're able to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is Huntington's. Have you ever had anybody else? One other person, which happened to be my Thea 2 weeks before, who passed there. So the other question I would like to know is on the spiel of your elevator pitch. You know, it's really hard for me to come up with it at the moment, even though I've been there a million years. So mine is like, you know what, ALS, you know what, Parkinson, you know what this is, but what any idea? Because I can't think of all the degenerate, I forget all the words, right? Those are important.
100%. And okay, so I am going to tell you that and Katrina Hamill, my vice president, I am not a fan whatsoever about saying we're ALS, Parkinson's, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever, blah, 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 blah. No, we are Huntington's disease. And let's hopefully live in a world one day that we can say we are Huntington's disease and people know what we mean. But in this situation, this does work. So typically we start out and have you ever heard of Huntington's disease? No. Okay, so Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative disease. It's genetic and it's terminal. It affects children and adults. Usually it has cognitive and psychiatric and involuntary movement. And then usually you'll cue in. And then one thing that really kind of cues them in, interestingly enough, is suicide ideation. It's something about suicide that's very important to most law enforcement and co-responder medical is that they just don't want to have a suicide case or come on a suicide. So a lot of times I'll say, our suicide prevalence is 3 times higher than the national population and different things like that. And said, can you imagine, families impacted by this and what they go through? And then usually they'll cue in. So yeah, usually I start with that. But I sometimes will say like schizophrenia, but usually I say cognitive impairment, psychiatric behaviors, and involuntary movement.
Until I start talking, and then I just remember,
Yeah.
I'm able to have this conversation.
It's-
But it just goes like, and that's why I do the first 3 months. You know what this is, this goes with that, we go there. That goes that way,
Yeah.
But it's not, so.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But you might get harder.
Girl, you call me and we'll keep going over it. You got my number.
I was just gonna, before we do another question, I was just gonna share that sometimes we're speaking with people that don't have that level of language, and so sometimes I'll use the phrase, it's a brain disease. It impacts somebody's mood, sometimes their movement, and sometimes, it affects, use the 3 M's. Sometimes that's an easy thing to remember: mood, motor, and mind. Mood, motor, mind. So if you're just really giving something simple, those are, if I think talking children or somebody that doesn't have the same educational level or needs some basic understanding. Question in the back?
I have a question.
No, thank you.
This has happened 10 years ago, and the understanding and the training of the law enforcers wasn't there at the time. And my son became violent and kind of uncontrollable, so I called the police. I made sure to the dispatcher to say, hey, he has Huntington's disease. Please don't come all guns blazing, okay? He's just having a meltdown. And I actually printed out all the material, and I gave it to the officer, I gave it to the fire department, and they still acted like he was this criminal, and he was fine. You know how they blow over something? He's just sitting there. And so anyway, I was very careful, with my wording and stuff. Nobody was injured or anything. So eventually what happened is I did call the psychiatrist right away, and she said, you have to call the police department, because nobody wants to call the police department on their loved one, because they know they're going to be treated like a criminal. Absolutely. At least at that time, the education just wasn't out there. Anyway, the outcome of it was, and I think you have to be careful of your wording, like we were talking about, is that he was took to the emergency room, and then he was labeled as being violent, and no one would take him. And I says, but I'm not taking him home. I said, are you going to release him on the street? His psychiatrist said he needs medication adjustments. okay? And so that became a big problem for the rest of his life, placement. It follows you
Yeah.
all the time. And so that's just, you know, if that ever happened again with my other son, well, first I'm going to go out and educate the local police department will be my first step when I get home. You know, he's doing fine now. But anyway, if you can give some little hints on that, on how to deal when you're in that situation.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting what you bring up is once we, because when I was looking for placement for my husband, and we're not only that he was, 38 years old and who looks at placement at 37, 38, but the second I said Huntington's, they would hang up the phone. Like, my husband has Huntington's. Nope, sorry, we're full. I'm like, you're not full. You just told me you weren't full, right? And then especially if they've had something like, some type of violence now forever, they're marked, and then it's hard to find placement. It goes so beyond law enforcement, right? So my whole thing, I don't know how you would not, if they marked him that he was on a hold, he needed, was he on a 72-hour hold at that time?
They didn't really hold him, no, they wanted to release him. They actually, he sat in the middle of the emergency room. He was never put anyplace. And again, the worst thing is to have a Huntington's disease, his loved one in the emergency room, flailing around and getting frustrated, and everybody just walks away from you, no matter how much you tell them. You're really causing them more anxiety, Anyway,
Yeah.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
I think also that letting them know, knowing, look, you saw my son, he was impulsive, he had an impulse thing, a situation. Right. Now you see he's fine, now we're here, this is where we're at. But I would be really with the doctors, very communicative, look, my son is very young, there is gonna be a day I'm gonna need placement. There's different things that I'm gonna need support services. And if you could please be very fair in your report and not mark him that he's a violent criminal that's going to cause destruction, really that open communication with that healthcare provider that is treating him or the psychiatric within the hold of that facility.
Actually, it was the nurse who told me, oh, you should have never said this.
Isn't that terrible?
And you just want to be honest, right? At the time you
Exactly.
want to be honest, but you have to be careful. And I did have they gave me a social worker, not from Huntington's, but
Yeah, I think often we're kind of embarrassed by things that happen within our family, right? And so we don't speak up as much because it's kind of like you're in this situation, you're at this psych hospital, this emergency room, your loved one's not getting care, people are kind of ignoring you, it's hard to speak up, and it's embarrassing to say, can you please not put to mark my chart, my son's chart as being impulsive and violent and scary or whatever, but because I know I called you, right? Because I needed help. So but I think speaking up and at least trying to make sure that it's not marked on them forever. But
We
Sorry.
have time for just another couple questions. I've got one back here, and then I see a comment up here again that might be related to this discussion, and then we'll see where we are.
I have Huntington's, and so I drive my girls to the park several times, and so it's been a problem where the not the police so much, but the public, they get in there and they're like, they think I'm drunk or high or something. So I've had 3 times over the last 2 years of them coming to the law enforcement with the girls, and so it's hard. Yeah. Any suggestions?
Yeah. Does anyone in the room have, I know, and I've heard of people that I've worked with that are going for a walk, taking their dog for a walk, just walking the block, being in their community with their children, their family, and having similar experiences where the police are called on them. Is there anyone in the room that's had that experience, and how have you approached it? I'm just curious if there's anyone in the room that's... It was my mom. How did she approach that?
Hold on, let me get the mic so I can hear you.
It was, well, she's gone now, but it was my mom who, they didn't believe her. And she told them, I got Huntington's, but she's moving a lot, with the chorea. Yeah. And so they even kept testing her. They even arrested her and put her in, tested her lots of times in jail, even though she came out negative. So we ended up having to talk to the chief and everybody. We had an appointment with them. But we had to advocate. We just had to advocate. And then let everybody know we're not embarrassed of their disease. This is our disease, but we didn't know anybody else had it. So that's what we had to do.
And how many of you, if you were approached by the police, would start to get nervous? How many of you? 100%. And what do we know about Huntington's disease? When we have more anxiety, more nervousness, what happens? Oh yeah, paranoia, movement, maybe being impulsive, maybe even amplifying some of those symptoms that that come with the anxious side of HD. It increases anxiety, so it'd be hard to interact with a law enforcement professional without having those things get even more amplified. So I know some people are able to verbally say, I have Huntington's disease, and to them it may mean nothing, but some people are able to verbalize it. Some people are not, and they're just trying to go to the park and have fun and be in nature and be with their family and live their life, go to the grocery store, do the day-to-day things that they still can do. And so it can be really challenging, and that's why we're talking about these proactive conversations. It's not going to solve every interaction. It's not going to solve every, not every interaction you're going to have with an individual is going to be positive possibly, but trying to have more positive than negative interactions and proactively approach them.
And can I leave you with the public impact real quick? And this is, you brought up public impact, right? Not just law enforcement was your thing. And I'm going to tell you guys a really quick story, and you guys can use this story anytime. I was at my daughter's soccer game. My husband loved to watch my daughter play soccer. She is an amazing soccer player. Now she's older. But when she would start getting goals, he would get really excited, and he'd run down the field, and his chorea would be really bad. His gait would be really bad. Sometimes he would fall. My daughter was an amazing soccer player. She was on like her 5th goal in the first quarter. They were going to pull her out. The other team was really mad because, 6-year-olds playing soccer is important, right? So I look over, and they're teasing my husband. They are mimicking him. They are laughing at him and pointing at him. Adults. And I look over at my daughter. It scores another goal. She puts her hands up and sees those people. She puts her head down, and she walks and asks the coach to take her off the field. And she sits there. So I sat and I stewed, and I wanted to use violence. I wanted to use anger. I wanted to use a lot of cuss words. And I just sat there, and I waited, and I had my head spin. So then I let Mike and the kids go back to the car. I said, go to the car. I'll be there in a minute. And I saw the little ringleader, because there was one of them. And I walked up to her, and I said, excuse me, can I talk to you? And any caregiver can use this. I said, I'm CEO of a nonprofit for Huntington's disease. That's what my husband's suffering for, and he's terminal. He's going to die, and he probably won't see his children graduate from high school. He was enjoying their soccer game. But I am filming a documentary on people and empathy for people who are sick. And I would love to interview you, and you tell me why you decided to act like that at a children's soccer game. So I'm going to give you my business card, and I would love to get you on film. I don't think she'll ever tease anyone at a soccer game again.
That's a way to teach a lesson. So we are at time. We have time for a final comment, and I think you might be a great person to be our last comment for the day, Christine.
So I want to empower you to take one day out of your week in your park, get her flyers, get her educational thing, and hand it out to every individual that you can find in that park. And let them know, when you see me, you applaud me. Don't be afraid of me. Approach me. Get to know me. Because that's a moment in time. You will always see them when you go back to your park. You will always see them. And they will become your voice, and they will welcome you there. So don't be afraid to go back. Go back even more.
I knew you would have some wisdom that we would all want to hear. So thank you so much, Katie and Jessica and everyone in the room. And that was just really powerful to hear stories and real situations that you all are dealing with this, because it's an everyday thing, and we do it together. So thank you so much for being here. Fill out the survey and enjoy the rest of convention.